projects that are either reconnecting communities or being more thoughtful about how we plan future connectivity for our infrastructure. And there's a lot of national and regional programs that are lending themselves to those efforts. So I'm really excited about that. So let's go ahead and get started. Just one housekeeping note. We are going to save the questions to the end. We have 4 presenters or 4 presentations, so we want to be respectful of everyone's time. First, we're going to have Sean Green and Michelle Enriquez speaking on the Beltline. Sean Green joined Beltline in 2013. His professional career has focused on urban multimodal transportation systems. Before joining ABI, Green spent 10 years with the Georgia Regional Transportation Authority and worked as a consulting engineer prior to that. He is a civil engineering graduate of the prestigious North Avenue Trade School in Atlanta and has been a bicycle commuter since 1994. He plays beer league ice hockey, makes sawdust, does occasional band gigs as a drummer, and believes himself to be a lot funnier than he actually is. Unless she murders him soon, he and his wife will hit their 30th anniversary on Labor Day weekend. Next, we have Michelle Enriquez. She joined Kimberly Horn in 2018 after graduating from Georgia Tech, go Jackets. She is passionate about enhancing accessibility and connectivity for all users, particularly through multimodal facilities. She is committed to creating functional and safe routes that are also enjoyable travel environments. Second to the Beltline, her favorite trail in Georgia is the Rottenwood Creek Trail along the Chattahoochee River. Michelle loves to hike, camp, and travel, and is most excited about visiting her family in Portugal in 2 weeks. So with that, I'll turn it over to you guys.
Awesome. Thanks. Hey guys, good morning. How we doing? Okay, just calibrating. That's us. Okay, Beltline 101. Who doesn't know about the Beltline? Anybody? Okay, let's go really fast then. So the takeaway from this slide here is the organization for which I work, Atlanta Beltline, Inc., we are an implementation agent for the city of Atlanta. We are stood up out of the redevelopment powers vested within the Atlanta Development Authority, also known as Invest Atlanta, enabling legislation 2005. So we're 20 years into this program. Most people know it as a trail program. Our funding mechanism, for the most part, runs off of a tax allocation district. Tax increment financing is the kind of generic phrasing for that. And that district expires at the end of 2030. So revenues lag by a year. So 2031, December 31st, that might be the end of Beltline as an organization. The mayor and his team are actually working right now on trying to extend all of the tax allocation districts in the city. We'll see how that goes, but it's not a vote of the populace and the citizenry. It's a vote of City Council, Atlanta Public Schools Board, and the Fulton County Board of Commissioners. So we'll see how that goes. It's not a 600,000 vote. It's about 27 people, I think. So our purpose, obviously, is ultimately it's an economic development program of programs. We've got housing, affordable housing. We've got commercial development, affordable commercial development. We've got public art. We've got, you guys know the trail, park space, brownfield cleanup, transit's in there. It's basically a city building program of programs, and we seem to be doing a pretty good job of it. We're extremely intentional about how we integrate, and we'll talk more about this, about how we integrate not just our corridor, but all the development along it. So, like I just kind of rolled through, you guys can read this and see where we stand. But one of the things that we've done with our typologies, if you will, our design standards, is, who are my friends from Atlanta here, from the city? Caven? There we go. Okay. Yeah, so when I say this with all love and respect. The city does not have a great track record with maintenance, right? So we have picked generational materials. We've picked concrete. We've picked stainless steel. We've picked granite facing, right? These are all things that will last generationally, as opposed to like galvanized pipe for handrails, for example, that lasts 7 years, right? We're doing stuff so that it's very high on the capital side of things, but from a maintenance and longevity perspective, we'll amortize it over 50 years. And so as we keep doing this, I guess the big takeaway on this one here is probably our 9, almost 10 to 1 return on investment. So for the $900 million that we've put into the ground, not just infrastructure, but into the social programs for affordable housing and legacy resident retention, we're seeing about $10 billion in economic development from adjacent development and whatnot. So it's been amazingly successful. I like to refer to it as a street without cars, because it does all of this stuff, right? So with a standard development along a street in Atlanta, the zoning code tells you have to do X, Y, and Z with respect to integrating that development into the street. Well, we do the same thing, just our street doesn't have any cars on it. So I talked a little bit about this, but our typical section for the corridor, and on average we have about 100, 120 feet of right-of-way width. In some places we only have 30, other places we have 300, right? So it varies, but for a typical section with about 100 feet of right-of-way width, we're trying to cram a lot of stuff in there, especially the stormwater, which is a huge thing because you think about the history of the Beltline being a former railroad corridor. If it's at the low point, people have been draining to the railroad for the last 100 years, right? And there's no way that we can undo that. So we have to not only deal with our own stormwater to meet the city's stormwater ordinance, we also have to deal with the bypass coming from all the other properties that are draining to us. So we have some amazing amounts of underground detention, retention. It's not sexy, nobody sees it, but it's a big damn deal. And I think with that, I'm going to turn it over to Michelle. So thank you guys.
Have to lower it always. Hi, everyone. So thank you, Sean, for the overview. I'm going to dive a little bit deeper into one of our design processes focused on one of the connections to the Southside Trail. And so what you're looking at here is one of our very first planning session boards back in July of 2016. We really started in on the Southside Trail a decade ago, basically. I mean, the survey was 2014, 2015. And so we started with just visioning, right? We threw every idea out there. We did a sidewalk analysis, bike lane analysis, transit analysis, property development, all of the above, all the data overlaid on each other to figure out where do public access points need to be along the Southside Trail. And so those sometimes are at-grade crossings, sometimes they're 20-foot elevation differences and massive ramps. And so I'm going to take you through one of the cool ones, which is United Ave Node, and it is one of the massive ramps. And so in the dashed white box kind of towards the right, that's where United Ave is. Some of the exhibits will say Confederate Ave. Atlanta had a reckoning at some point in this design process, and we renamed Confederate to United. Big moves, so just bear with me on that one. I wasn't going to update all the exhibits. So in 2016, when we took this out to the public, we just had some ideas, right? Point-to-point drawings of, hey, the street's at 920 elevation, and the bridge needs to be at 940. United Ave, and you'll see in a next slide, had substandard vertical clearance, so we knew that we were going to be rebuilding this bridge no matter what, and that we were going to rebuild it to accompany future transit. So we know you need a 17-foot vertical clearance, structure depth, so we're looking at 20 feet of elevation gain, and how much ramp do you need to do that, which is maxing out ADA and landings and everything like that. We drew some squiggly lines, we drew some right angles. What ultimately stuck was this like swooping arc over into the Beltline. And so as we continued community engagement, the renderings got better and better, right? Big difference from the previous one to this one. We got some landscape architects, always good partners. And so again, we still have that 920 and 940, but we're starting to see where this arc and this swoop is really going. What wasn't clear in the the last slide and is much clearer in this rendering is there's actually a stream there too. There's a 48-inch culvert that goes underneath the Beltline Trail and opens up into a stream. And so obviously a lot of permitting and stuff with that, but we wanted to stay far away from that with all of our bridge structure. But we're starting to get into the placemaking of it, right? Like, we want this to be an enjoyable experience. Where can we put trees? Where can we put some green infrastructure? And so by April of 2017, a full year after we had first taken those visioning boards to the public, we have this very beautiful artistic rendering of what ultimately was designed. Like, we did not change too much from this. And so it starts out as a ramp that's on structure, on fill with 2 walls, eventually transitions to columns, and then swoops over into the Beltline Trail, all with, like he said, stainless steel handrails and safety fence. And then that was April of 2017. Then we really dove into years of engineering and design. I'm not going to bore you with that. Engineering documents, just know our structural engineers worked very, very, very hard. In 2019, Atlanta Beltline opened the Interim Trail. And for anyone who didn't get to experience the Interim Trail, I am so, so sorry, because it was one of the coolest experiences, having a gravel trail like that in the city of Atlanta, to experience that just covered in nature. It was beautiful. It stayed open 4 years, from 2019 all the way through 2023 when we started construction. So this photo was me on the trail, just May 2020. And then, like I mentioned, United Ave had substandard vertical clearance. So in about July of 2020, one too many box trucks got stuck underneath, and we had to do emergency demolition. It was deemed unsafe, so the bridge had to come down. We only took down the steel bridge portion. We had to keep the concrete walls, right? Like, that was maintaining 20 feet of earthwork, right? So we could not demolish the entire bridge at that point. But you can imagine, you know, we had this beautiful interim trail, and now there's a hole in the middle. And so along with the emergency demolition, they also installed what was staircases and an RRFB that we permitted through the city of Atlanta. So quite unfortunate for some cyclists, some strollers, things like that. But we were able to, you know, get people off the trail, cross safely across United, and then back onto the trail, just a slight detour. And so it maintained being open all throughout 2021, 2022. And then when construction started in spring of 2023. So we just hit our 2-year construction timeline. It is about to be done in December. But in January 2024 is really when they were able to start demoing the rest of that concrete bridge. You can kind of still see the steel portion on the left there. You can imagine they had to move all of that earthwork and place it elsewhere on the site. So it does take a good amount of time of just moving dirt around before we can take that concrete structure down. But once that concrete structure came down, that bridge went up pretty fast. So this was January of 2024. By February of 2024, we had the battered piles going in. Funny story about this, I took one of our young analysts out who didn't know the project super well or anything, just wanted to get them out on site. They were asked all the right questions, they were doing great. We get back in the car and they were like, Michelle, I don't know how to tell you this, but those piles are crooked. And I was like, no, but they're supposed to be like that. And had to explain battered piles to them, like he thought he had just discovered a massive fault in construction. So that was February. By March 2024, the rebar cage went up for the bridge that was necessary. The person in the photo is who's been working on this bridge ever since he was an intern at Kimley Horn. So he was pretty happy to see this rebar cage go up. Again, a lot that you don't see, but is really exciting to us, right? By August 2024, we were installing footings for all of those columns. And I like to show the photo on the left because you can actually see a person that's in there. These footings are massive. And was confusing to me at first because I was like, it's a ped bridge. Why are these footings massive? And it's just like, there's no live load on it, you know? It's different when there's a tractor trailer on I-75 versus me and my bike on this bed bridge. So these were massive, massive footings that we had to, again, excavate all out to get them in. And very quickly were not seen. And so by January of 2025, that was all covered, and we were starting to fill things back in. Columns went up. We have about a third of the wall there on the left. And what's going to go in this area in between all the columns is actually a green infrastructure pond. So it's going to be a really nice landscaped above ground pond. And then about April of 2025, the wall on the left is now complete, and we're starting to build up that next wall that comes from the sidewalk. And so this is about where it is right now, and not much progress has happened since April, but again, this connection point will be complete by the end of this year, so we're really, really excited about that one. And I will be taking a before and after shot with the rendering in this one. But I don't know if you want to also talk about lessons learned. We've all learned along this process. But like Sean said, the Beltline has 20 years of experience building trails, and that is super crucial, right? Like, we are still implementing new trails, right? Southside Trail is under construction right now. There's future segments to be constructed. And it's important that we learn from implementation and from the maintenance concerns that Beltline is seeing, right? Like, we can design a 3 to 5 foot shoulder and a 3 to 1 slope, and we're like, yeah, it's stable, it's gonna be landscaped, it's gonna be great. But if Beltline's having their crews go out there after every major storm to clean up dirt off the trail, that's not sustainable, right? And so we do have to pivot, and having certain segments in design and being able to do that is amazing. And having people that truly do care about making this a low maintenance facility and learning constantly and making it a better facility throughout the years. Pretty rudimentary, but I will tell everyone this: visit the site while it's raining. Like Sean said, like, everything dumps onto the Beltline. So understanding where water is flowing, where water is pooling, super, super important. And we have massive, massive underground detention systems, as well as above ground swales and ponds that all help resolve some of these issues that we were seeing years ago. And then on the right, most of y'all have probably been on the East Side Trail. And so this is one of those things we're learning from implementation and the maintenance of it all, right? Runners had started to develop kind of some, like, their own shoulder for running, right? And you can see it was tearing away. It was just becoming a dirt ditch. And so what Beltline did was install a soft shoulder for those runners, and then that helped limit the dirt shoulder that was happening there. And then last is know your audience. You interact with a lot of different people on a corridor this long and big, right? I've met with HOA presidents. I've met with people who are really for the Beltline, people who are really against the Beltline. Know your audience and adapt that conversation accordingly. And then we just wanted to end with some fun facts that most people don't know, but, like, because we've been doing this for years, we know. And so the first one, I think it's really awesome how the Beltline integrates into the community, right? And so one thing that they do from a, like, little artistic point is that all the Beltline bridges are painted the nearby school colors, just to show some, like, school support. And then it's really hard to see in this photo. I couldn't get, like, a good photo of it. But the historic Fourth Ward Park that Beltline built by the East Side Trail, they have bands of stones that actually denote the design storm year. So that whole park is a stormwater park that's meant to flood when it's in major storm events. And so if you're a nerd like me who used to live by this park, after every rainstorm went out there to check the water level. But they have, I think it's 25, 50, and 100-year bands.
It's 100-year and 500-year.
There you go. And that's everything we had. Thank you.
Thanks, John and Michelle. Like I said, we'll save questions to the end. Next, we'll have the WSP crew to talk about the Stitch. Claudia Bellato, Tori Pustanik, and Andrew Woodhouse. Claudia is the Southeast Region Executive at WSP in the U.S. In this role, she is responsible for steering the operations and growth of all WSP's business lines in the region toward the objective of enabling WSP to be the preferred and trusted choice for clients, employees, and partners. Her 24 years of industry experience include managing a range of major transportation projects and stakeholder and public participation programs. Claudia received a bachelor's degree in telecommunications from Penn State University and a master's degree in city planning from the Georgia Institute of Technology. She's registered with the American Institute of Certified Planners, and she is serving as the project manager for the Stitch. Tori is the Vice President in Civil Engineering at WSP USA with over 17 years of project management and design experience on GDOT, county, city, and CID projects including streetscapes, widenings, intersections, and many more. She's a licensed professional engineer in the state of Georgia. She is a proud graduate of the Georgia Institute of Technology and began her career in the Office of Roadway Design for Georgia Department of Transportation, where she gained invaluable experience. She is actively involved in ASHI Georgia and WTS Atlanta. She is currently serving as a deputy project manager for the Stitch and is running the day-to-day activities for all aspects of the project. Lastly, we have Andrew. He is a senior traffic engineer at WSP USA with over 6 years of design and project management experience on projects spread across the East Coast from Georgia to Pennsylvania. He has a background in traffic design focused on ITS, sign and marking, and traffic signals. He is a licensed professional engineer in the states of Virginia, Maryland, and Georgia, and a licensed professional traffic operations engineer. He is a graduate of the University of Pittsburgh. He is currently serving as the roadway ITS and sign and marking SME for the Stitch. And with that, I'll turn it over to Claudia. Thank you.
Well, good morning, everyone. This is really exciting for me because in those 24 years that I've been working, this is my first summer seminar. So I'm honored that I get to actually share one of the projects that I'm most passionate about. I think what's so exciting about the Stitch, similar to the Beltline, and there's a lot of lessons that the Stitch has taken from the Beltline, it's a transformative project, right? And I think being an Atlanta native, having the opportunity to be involved in a transformative project is as good as it gets. So I think one of the biggest things to recognize about the Stitch is it really depends on partnership, right? And successful partnerships are what is going to get this project through to implementation. So our direct client is the Atlanta Downtown Improvement District, but there are lots of other people involved, and the project will not be able to come to fruition without everybody being in the boat. But the great story is everybody's been in the boat. So there's been support and funding from USDOT, FHWA, Department of Housing and Urban Development, and of course GDOT and the city are key partners in delivering major elements of the project. ARC and MARTA also really important partners in this process. So to those of you in the room with those agencies, thank you, and we're going to continue to work together to bring this to reality. This is about connecting communities, right? Reconnecting communities, and as many of you know, when the downtown connector was constructed back in the 60s and widened, it had an impact, right? It divided what used to be a connected community that did cause displacements. And so, the original spirit and idea of the Stitch to place a lid over the connector to reconnect the community is the heart of this story. And it also provides an opportunity to catalyze developments and to just improve the city overall. So when we got started on this project a couple of years ago, the first thing that we did was a Stitch master plan. Now the Stitch in concept has been around for a very long time, more than 20 years. And the original idea for the Stitch came from civic leaders who worked in what's now the Truist building, looking out of their window and thinking, what could we do here? Could we do something to transform downtown? And over the years since then, ADID had different points where they looked at different opportunities, but when the Stitch master plan funding came through and a RAISE grant, that was when everything really got rolling. And so that's when our work began, and it has continued since. The master plan process went on for about a year and a half, and it was a soup to nuts effort that involved a lot of community engagement. We started with a baseline analysis of what conditions were. We worked with the community to get a vision and goals that everyone could buy into, and then worked through recommendations. And now we're at a point where we're working on those next steps. So I'm going to show you a little bit of the high-level illustrations, and then Tori and Andrew are going to be able to talk about some of the design challenges that we're working through today, because if this project is anything, it's complex. Because while there is the vision for reconnecting the community, the park, the City of Atlanta street network, we also have to do that without interrupting operations on the downtown connector. So all of that comes into play with everything that we do. So what you see before you is what the connector looks like today, an aerial shot. You see some outlines of where the stitch lid will go. And when we are complete, what we will have is a roughly 3/4 of a mile capping where we've got interconnectivity of streets. We have a full park with a lot of different elements that will have to be operated and maintained. Gathering places, passive park areas. It's a true opportunity for both recreation and relaxation and mobility, and a catalyst for future development. So here is another view that shows where the phases of the Stitch Park will go, how that interacts with some of the existing development in the area and other development areas that the city will plan to redevelop. So today, this is a photograph of the Stitch Park Phase 1. And Phase 1 is where we are currently focused on our design activities. The project received a Reconnecting Communities Neighborhood Partnership grant a couple of years ago to construct the first phase. I'll talk more about funding in a few minutes, but this gives you a sense of that boundary, Peachtree, Ralph McGill, and Cortlandt Street, and the planning work that will become the Phase 1 park. That's the rendering before you now. And when we extend beyond Phase 1, there will be 2 additional phases, a total of 17 acres for the park with many different features, amphitheater, event pavilions, all types of things that have been envisioned with help from the community during community charrettes. So a place that everybody can see as a destination and people who live in the area can walk through and enjoy every day. So a phased delivery strategy is, of course, really a requirement when we're talking about something of this magnitude. So I talked a lot about partnership. For long-term maintenance and to help ensure a sustainable funding source, a special services district has been approved by the Atlanta City Council. What that means is that the Stitch will become something similar to the Beltline, right? Beltline Inc. operates as its own arm focused on implementation, operations, and maintenance. That is what the Stitch, that's the vision for the Stitch as well, Stitch Inc. So we're on the road to establishing Stitch Inc. and the administration of the project. The Beltline talked about a lot of the operations and maintenance decisions you have to make. That's true of the Stitch as well, a lot of lessons learned there. And then, of course, park programming. There's a lot of thought and organization that has to go beyond that. And right now, the timeline we're looking at is all 3 of these phases delivered by 2036. Now, all that being said, I know there's been a lot in the news. The construction funding for the Stitch came through the Inflation Reduction Act, right? And now we have a new bill, the BBB Act, the Big Beautiful Bill Act that passed, has changed a lot of what's going to happen when it comes to funding in the future, so we think. But, right now, we're still working with our partners. We're still moving forward. If it comes to pass that construction funding is no longer available for the Stitch, there are other sources and other ways to do that. So we have not lost any momentum. And I'm going to turn it over to Tori to talk about what we have going on to get to the finish line.
All right. Thanks, Claudia. Good afternoon, everyone. So Claudia kind of gave an overall description of the Stitch project and all 3 phases. So I'm going to dig down a little deeper into the Stitch Phase 1 components, which we're currently in design for. So the first component is the cap structure and tunnel itself. So this will be a bridge over the interstate that will connect to 2 existing bridges, so the Peachtree Street Bridge and the Cortland Ralph McGill Bridge. So once this bridge is constructed, it will create an overall 800-foot long tunnel. And in that tunnel will need to be all the tunnel systems, including fire protection, lighting, ventilation, signage, communications. So the second component that you're all aware of is the park. And so the park will go, of course, on top of the Stitch cap. It'll also go on top of the existing structures, expand onto the existing structures, I would say, and then also encroach in the areas on either side of the interstate, which are now the City of Atlanta's Mayor's Park, as well as the St. Luke's Garden. So that'll create a new 4+ acre park for the Stitch Phase 1. And so in that park, as Claudia described, there'll be plazas, there'll be gardens, there'll be an interactive water feature where children can play that's proposed, a playground, a big fountain that'll be a beacon to the park. Items like that are included in the design. So one thing that some people may not know is also included in the design of the park are 2 structures, so basically buildings on top of the cap, which is on top of the interstate. So proposed is a gateway pavilion and a shade structure in the Phase 1, and those will have facilities such as restrooms, maintenance activities, as well as a space for a cafe or food vendor to move in. So the third component I want to talk about are the roadway corridors, and this is one that I think some people don't know about. Included in the Stitch Phase 1 project are 7 corridors in downtown Atlanta and over 8 miles of multimodal and streetscape improvements. So we'll be looking into lane reallocations, protected bike lanes, upgrades, and expansions to existing sidewalks. So here is a typical section in a profile view of the Stitch cap structure and tunnel. As you can see, the cap structure will need to span 15 lanes over the interstate, and then the profile will need to tie into the existing structures on either side. Here is a rendering of how the cap structure itself ties into the park and how the park on either side of the cap structure is laid out. So this is park in Phase 1 is planned to be a gathering space, a way to connect the community. There'll be the opportunity to house markets, concerts, even weddings in this park as well. So now you can see some renderings of the park. These were included in the master plan. So the first one you'll see is the Groves and Gardens. So that is if you're standing currently in Mayor's Park and then looking out. The second one is the Native Gardens. So that's a view as if you're standing on the current Courier Street near St. Luke's Church, and you're looking up into the heart of the park. So as you can see, there's a big grade difference in that area, so a meandering path is proposed to get you up into the grade with the finished park surface. This view is of Peachtree Plaza. So this is in the center of the park, looking towards the existing Peachtree Street Bridge. This will be a place of gathering where one of the structures will be located as well. So these are the 7 roadway corridors that are included in the Stitch project. Some of the improvements are shown in these next typical sections, which you can see we're looking at lane reallocations for protected bike lanes and extra sidewalk space. Bicyclists and pedestrians are going to be the priority in these projects moving forward. So with any project of this size and complexity, there comes design challenges and opportunities. So I want to talk through a few of those that we're fleshing out right now. So one of the major design challenges is determining the spans and bends for the structure itself. So this bridge has to support a heavy load. It has to support the loads of the park, which include the structures on top of the park, as well as 30-foot trees that are planned. One of the biggest, I would say, one of the biggest outcries from our public engagement was the need for shade and a big tree canopy. So to accomplish this, we're proposing large trees, which of course are heavy, and the soil that is needed for those large trees is also heavy. So therefore, we've looked at a multitude of alternatives for the span and bend alignment. So right now we're looking at a 3-span bridge with steel girders. We've looked at a single span with steel girders, as well as a 2-span alternative that has concrete pre-stressed girders. So the cap structure will also need to analyze a live load, because there'll need to be an emergency path for emergency vehicles, as well as for deliveries and maintenance activities. Another challenge with the cap structure itself is the vertical clearance. So with the systems required for the tunnel and meeting the minimum vertical clearance, and also trying to tie into the existing bridges with a smooth transition, it's all kind of a balancing act. So for the large trees, we need 5 feet of soil. So one of the other challenges is constructability. How do we construct this actual bridge over the interstate while maintaining traffic? So as you can see in this very colorful diagram, we've looked at beam placement and crane locations, and we're working through a plan to better deliver this project. And here you can see some draft typical sections of how we're mitigating some challenges with the grade difference between the existing structures and the proposed new top of ground line. We're looking at terraces and planters, as well as some other solutions. So I'm going to turn it over now to Andrew to talk about ITS and signage.
Thank you, Tori. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the ITS, the signage, and even some pavement markings that we're going to propose that are innovative and kind of unconventional applications for the project. So as Tori mentioned, this is an 800-foot long tunnel, which the National Fire Protection Association classifies as a Class A tunnel, which is kind of an intermediate tunnel. So we worked extensively with Atlanta Fire Rescue and GDOT operations in order to kind of tailor those vague and broad requirements to really apply them to the project. So some of the things that we're doing is there's going to be full CCTV and automated incident detection coverage of the tunnel, so every single lane. We're going to look at the ventilation fans and the portals to make sure everything is up and running in the case of a fire emergency. There's also going to be a linear heat detection fiber optic cable that's tied to a fixed firefighting system, and then a separate tunnel fiber optics communication network that'll tie into some traffic controls, DMS and lane use control signals. So as Tori mentioned, we have a very constrained vertical clearance. That has been a huge challenge when it comes to signing, especially overhead signing. So the signs are going to be 30 inches tall, 2.5 feet. You're usually getting about 20 feet. So very different than what you're used to. And we have exits in the immediate vicinity of the tunnel that we have to sign for. So we also wanted to think about the future build out of the second and third phases of the cap and avoid any rework when it comes out to that. So we looked at the MUTCD. There is very minimal and vague guidance. It's just kind of do what you need to do. So we looked at national and global examples of signs in constrained spaces. So the first place we looked was the Big Dig in Boston. Another great example was the Fort Pitt Bridge in Pittsburgh, and then the Alaskan Way Tunnel in Seattle. And they didn't really have everything that we needed, so we decided to broaden our reach and look internationally. So we looked at the A86 in Paris and the A7 in Linz. So down at the bottom, you can actually see one of the signs that we're currently proposing. It's got 18-inch text because, believe it or not, with 20-inch text, it was too wide for the downtown connector. All 7 or 8 lanes. So It's an interesting challenge. And one of the other interesting things that we had is we have an exit with an option lane at Pine Street and Peachtree Street. So as you all know, for GDOT requirements, it has to be an arrow per lane sign. How are we going to fit an arrow per lane sign in a tunnel? Kind of difficult. So we worked extensively with traffic operations and kind of narrowed down on this partial arrow per lane schema, and we looked at 7 different arrow options. So 3 shown at the top in this kind of purple are based on the 2011 METCD, 2 in blue that are based off of the 2023 METCD, and 2 fully custom arrows that I came up with. And our goal was trying to really convey this as clear as possible, because you're going to be traveling at highway speeds, and really, can you see this in the tunnel? So we ended up narrowing down from 7 to 2 with traffic operations. And in the interest of time, we may come back to this in the question and answer period, because we really want to get your feedback. So on top, we have a 20-inch tall arrow that is based off the 2023 METCD standards. We've widened it out to be 4 inches thick. And then at the bottom, we have a fully custom arrow that respects all of the dimensions from the standard highway signs specification for the text size. So really interesting, really challenging. I'm sure that there's some people in the room that have been getting tons of Teams messages with me of, hey, look at this arrow, what do you think? So please help me so I don't have to send them more messages. One of the other really interesting things that I never thought we would get into is pavement markings. So when you've got a 30-inch sign, you have to make sure that this exit is signed super clearly and you can actually find your way to it. So 2 of the really interesting things that we're doing is using exit numbering markings in the lane. So which they're used in parts of Texas and Florida, but they're usually on the shoulder. So this will be a novel approach of putting it in the lane. And then we're going to be using exit destination markings, actually putting the destinations on the pavement in the lane. We saw this when we were looking at different tunnels, and it's used extensively on the Italian Autostrada system. They have it, and it's interesting because it can span multiple lanes across on the shoulder, and we're like, well, let's try to keep it actually in the lanes where we're going to have the exit. So for Pine Street, really easy, fits in a lane. Peachtree Street, a little bit more challenging. So as you can see, we've got a kind of weird chop of the tree is broken up, and we're looking at different ways that we can really adjust that so that way it's a little bit more conducive to actual reading. So I'd like to thank you for your time and attention, and we'll take questions later.
Thank you, guys. Y'all are doing great on time. Thank you. So next, hold on one second. Next, we have Sarah Nastasi and Jonathan Coleman with AECOM. And here we go. They'll be talking about vulnerable road user infrastructure. Sarah Nastasi is a member of the traffic safety team at AECOM. She received a bachelor's and master's degree from the Georgia Institute of Technology. Within Georgia ITE, she co-chairs the Georgia ITE Safety Committee. Working and living in a growing urban environment has driven her to develop a safety skill set focused on protecting vulnerable road users, managing speeds, and reducing crashes on our roadways. When not working on our roadways, she can be often found playing on and around them, cycling through the city, going on runs, or rowing on the Chattahoochee River. Jonathan Coleman celebrated his 20th year anniversary with AECOM, previously URS, this year. He gained his professional engineer license from Michigan in 2010 and received competency for his PE license in Georgia in 2016. In 2018, he received his Road Safety Professional 1 certificate. Since late 2015, he has worked as a deputy project manager for the GDOT safety contract for District 4 and 7, and now recently as program manager for District 7. He has led over 26 road safety audits for Georgia Department of Transportation, as well as oversaw the development of dozens of traffic engineering studies and countless safety crash screenings. Jonathan has a beautiful wife of 20 years, 6 children, and 1 dog. He plays the piano and trumpet. He's a churchgoer and an avid Jesus follower. He is passionate about road safety, especially as 4 of his children are now driving, 1 more this year, and the last of 6 next year. Thank you.
Thank you. As we thought about bringing into focus transportation and connecting communities, this project really rose to the top as what we wanted to talk about. It's a small project, but it has a major connection. And it's PI 0020200, and it's State Route 8 down to Lee Hollowell from Proctor Creek Greenway to the Atlanta Beltline. So for our project overview, we do have the project description, but 3 points that really stand out. Number one, the PED bike connection. We want to connect the Proctor Creek Greenway to the Atlanta Beltline. Second, it is replacing and new infrastructure. It's only 0.33 miles where we're replacing the current on-street bicycle lane with the 8 to 10 foot side path, and then 0.11 miles two-way separated cycle track. So again, this small project, major connection. It's only less than half a mile, and we're hoping to make this major connection. So we have the Capitol, we have the airport. You can see it's just on the west side of Atlanta here, and so you can kind of see where it's at. But we do have the Atlanta Beltline connection over on the, did you look at it, right? And then we have the Proctor Greenway. All right, I'm going to hand it over to Sarah to get into the details.
Good morning, everyone. I'm really excited to talk to you more about this project. Jonathan, thank you for giving us a little bit of background on the project location. One other thing I'll highlight right now that's directly on your screen is above that orange line for our PI is we have our Bankhead MARTA station, and we also have Maddox Park. So we have a lot of generators in this area that we're looking to connect, and we have some existing and some newly completed trails in the area that we're looking to connect. So going to dive in here a little bit more to the project justification, and then I'm also going to, after this, show you some fun visuals and numbers that I think get me really excited about the impact that I think we have beyond this half-mile segment. So for this project, when we looked at justifying it, we were looking at doing a predictive BC. So we do have historical crashes along the corridor. If you're familiar with Donnelly Hollowell, it's a pretty busy road, about 20,000 ADT, principal arterial. You do already have those existing PED generators, right? You have MARTA, you have Bankhead, you have Proctor Creek. So there is activity and there were historical crashes. But when we looked at this project, we wanted to justify it. We wanted to give it credit where credit's due. We wanted to, we know with trails like the Beltline, you're gonna experience additional demand. People are going to have a new facility. They're going to have new connections. Whether they use it for work, leisure, play, you're going to see more people in the area. So we wanted to account for that with our justification for the project. So what we did is we looked to make a crash adjustment factor and incorporated it into our BC ratio. And how we did that was we looked to the Highway Safety Manual. So there's some numbers and letters on the screen. I don't expect you to necessarily take them all away today, but the equation you can look for if you want to do something similar, and there's also other equations for different characteristics of intersection and corridors that you might see in the Highway Safety Manual, is HSM 1229. So we used that and we looked at, okay, what is the number of predicted crashes that the HSM is expecting us to have on this corridor? Now, in the future, when we have more volumes coming in, we know that exposure leads to higher risk for crashes, right? Same as if you're driving your car. If I drive my car 5 times a day versus my sister who maybe drives it like once a day, it's actually opposite of that, but maybe then I'm more likely to get into a crash just because I'm on our roadway, I'm on our transportation system more. So we wanted to show that with the more PEDs and bikes we're gonna have on this corridor. So our friends at the Beltline actually were really awesome, and so we had existing counts, right? We had that data, we had the TMCs, we had the PED volumes, but how do we try to put a number to what we're expecting to come to this corridor? Well, thankfully, there were similar sections of the West Side Trail already constructed, and they do a great job at collecting data. So we were able to partner with them. They shared their count data, and we were able to use that as our predicted future volume. And we used this, plugged it into the BC, and were able to see what our facility, our new side path, would be able to bring to the corridor. All right, potential for impact. And I think you'll just see how this kind of builds into, our expectation to see more people out here on the corridor. So as Jonathan mentioned, we have 2 trails. We have the Proctor Creek and we have the Atlanta West Side Beltline. Those are really catering to your interested but concerned cyclists. All ages, all abilities, a lot of different people using them. But then if you want to connect between the 2, you have about a half mile where if you're new to cycling, you're younger, you might not be comfortable. So right now you might have people who aren't making those trips, or you might have people choosing to make a different mode because ultimately they're not comfortable using, themselves, walking, rolling, or biking through that half mile. So we're really coming in and we're gonna provide a facility that moves you from the somewhat confident range over to the future user group with the interested but concerned cyclists. So we should be catering to both users on either side of our corridor. And I think if you're familiar with Darnley Hallwell, there's a lot of, uses and demand on it. I myself kind of fall in between like the interested but concerned and somewhat confident, but there's something to be said about cycling alongside 20,000 cars and heavy vehicles. It's not very comfortable, so actually if you go into like Google Street View, and we saw it in the field too, you see people using the sidewalk, much where our side path will be in the future. And so this image is just kind of highlighting as well the backbone of the existing network that we see for peds and bikes in Atlanta. This is specifically looking at bicycle infrastructure. And this is just Google Earth, but you can see the West Side Reservoir Park. You have the Proctor Creek Greenway running through. That's separated, that's a trail, it's a dedicated ped bike facility. You kind of see north-south there at the Beltline, and you can see a curve, which is one of their connector trails going into the aquarium. So we're really looking to match this existing infrastructure and match the needs and wants of the design users that are out there. Kind of illustrate here a little bit more about the potential of this trail to increase walking and biking in the area. Take a look at these numbers and remember them for the next slide a little bit. So a walking trip might take you for 1 mile about 20 to 25 minutes. A cycling trip for the same distance might take 5 to 7 minutes, or even 2 miles, you can get there 10 to 15 minutes. Now, I do think, we have a choice in our modes, but also it's our job as stewards of our transportation system to make that choice a comfortable one. I just don't think you can expect someone to choose to walk or bike if it's not a comfortable facility. So this project's trying to make that choice a little bit easier for people in the area. And so y'all can break my hearts here, but I hope you don't. But so I want you to raise your hand if you live within a mile of a grocery store, of a gym, or a park. Cool. Now, keep it up. Now, you can drop it. You can drop it, and you can break my heart if you want to. And some of you will, and that's okay, right? We've seen with our user groups from Ashford, not everyone might cycle. But if you had facilities available to you where you were comfortable, you had separation from traffic, you would change a trip from car to bike or walk, keep it up. If you don't think you can drop it down. Cool. So a lot of people, right? You can see the impact that this might have on this community and if your community got similar infrastructure. Our friends at ARC, they were really awesome. I just reached out to them like a week or two before this presentation and asked if they had some updated numbers from their ABM, and they said that 10% of trips, for auto trips, based off their 2020 ABM, are a mile or less. And then if you look to 2 miles or less, that's 24% of automobile trips. Thankfully, I was excited to see y'all were probably more than 20%, but you can see these numbers kind of illustrate we have the ability to do some modal shifts here. So, whether you are the person biking, walking, cycling, you might be thankful that some of your friends decided to take another mode and made your trip in car a little bit easier. And so these last few images, I just kind of want to illustrate, how we might have impact beyond just our half-mile corridor. Now, these are as like the crow flies distances. This is just like a mile radius, and obviously you need, just like our project, we need more projects that provide that, backbone infrastructure to really make a complete trip feel safe, because if there's a break in a link, you might not take it, especially if you're in that interested, concerned group. So this is just 1 mile within our project, some places where people might want to go. So we have community resources like the Grove Park Rec Center and YMCA. We have schools. We already have the parks that I talked about, big one, MARTA Station. They're also looking at doing a transit-oriented development in the future. We could just bring more to the area. And then the Echo Street West mixed-use development, if you've seen that, right outside Georgia Tech on Donnelly, Hollowell, and Northside. You zoom out, you start thinking bigger. We can connect to more schools. We have 4 universities within 2 miles. And so if you look like up in the top of the screen, you can see Proctor Creek Greenway. If you're all the way up there, maybe, I mean, I don't expect to be everyone, right? But you might be able to reach Morehouse and Clark and Spelman more easily because we also have other facilities not shown in this image, like the cycle tracks on MLK. So we have a lot of reach. I hope y'all can kind of dream big too and see the big impact that a small project may be able to have and make safer, more fun, and livable communities. So that's all we had. If you have questions, feel free to reach out. Again, just want to highlight that this project is a GDOT project with our friends over in the safety team. So Kelly, Ron, and Connor, also great for questions too, and have really helped spearhead this effort. Thank you.
Thanks, Sarah and Jonathan. So now we'll have our last speaker today, Megan Will with the Cumberland CID, and she'll be talking to us about the Cumberland Sweep. Okay. Megan Will serves as the Director of Planning and Projects for the Cumberland Community Improvement District, bringing more than 20 years of public and private sector planning experience to the role. She leads the CID's capital project portfolio and oversees strategic planning initiatives that support the district's continued growth and vibrancy. Prior to joining the CID in 2023, Megan held leadership roles in Florida and Texas, including Director of Planning and Development for the city of Bee Cave, Texas. There, she guided the city's engineering, permitting, and code enforcement operations and played a key role in shaping mixed-use developments that defined the community's character. Her municipal planning experience also includes roles with the city of Dripping Springs, Texas, and the town of Fort Myers Beach, Florida. Earlier in her career, Megan served as a senior planner and project manager with several Atlanta engineering firms, including Jacobs and Robert & Company. Megan holds a Bachelor of Arts in Historic Preservation from the University of Mary Washington and a Master of City and Regional Planning from Georgia Tech. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. So we're going to talk about the Cumberland Community Improvement District and our big project, the Cumberland Sweep. So for those of you who may not be familiar with CIDs or with Cumberland, we were Georgia's first CID, formed in 1988. We're about 6.5 square miles located in Cobb County, just northwest of the city of Atlanta, just over the Chattahoochee River is where we start. We have about 190 commercial property owners who pay an additional 5 mills in property tax, and that's what provides our working capital in the CID. We leverage these funds to advance transportation, infrastructure, and beautification projects, and the commercial property owners have invested and committed over $180 million in enhancements across the district during our history. Just a few more facts and figures about us. We have about 33,000 residents. That's up from only 10,000 a decade ago. So we have grown exponentially in our residential segment in the last decade. We have 88,000 jobs in the district, and that's up over 11,000 since 2019. So even with the pandemic, we've continued to grow in our jobs in the district. Our real estate value has increased over $2.2 billion in the past decade, and we have 10 million visitors annually to our district. Now, of course, those of you who know the area know the big driver for that is we are the home of the Atlanta Braves at Truist Park. So that's also a unique factor for us. So here's a little bit of our history. Again, Cumberland, for those of you who know the Atlanta area, really started to become a place in the 70s. We had our first high-rise come out of the ground there at the intersection of 75 and 285 in the early 70s. The Cumberland Mall opened in 73. I-75 was completed, making that link in 77. In the 80s, all that growth began to create some concern about was transportation, was traffic going to hamper the continued vibrancy of the area. So local developers, led by John Williams, came together and talked with the Georgia legislature, which led to the formation of CIDs and Cumberland in particular. In the 1990s, the CID fostered a lot of transportation projects to better connect our district. We had the Cumberland Loop Road, which came about, the Kennedy Interchange, the Windy Ridge Reliever. And then in the 2000s, we saw the opening of the Cobb Energy Performing Arts Center, and we began to look at additional modes of transportation in the district. One really important thing is that in 1992, the CID actually expanded their mission to include looking at transit, and we'll talk a little bit more about how that figures in later. So today, our focus is really on the multimodal connectivity. We've got great transportation infrastructure in the district, but we need to serve our residents and our visitors with the bike and ped connections and also the first and last mile transit connectivity. And this is what brings us to the Cumberland Sweep. It's a 3-mile multimodal path connecting our major employment, cultural, and entertainment destinations. These include the Battery and Truist Park, Cumberland Mall, Cobb Galleria Center, which is Cobb's Convention Center, and also the National Park Service. We have 2 units of the Chattahoochee Regional National Recreation Area within our district. One, Paces Mill Palisades, is the highest visited of those units and gets about 300,000 visitors annually. The sweep will have dedicated lanes for walking and biking and also an innovative autonomous shuttle system with the goal of providing safe multimodal transportation to our growing district and to provide that first and last mile connectivity linking all of our regionally significant trails and transit. And here you can see the sweep in its entirety. We have 6 segments of bike and ped and AV, and then also our 2, they're in pink, 2 pedestrian bridge connections. One is an existing pedestrian bridge that connects from Cumberland Mall over to Cobb Galleria Center. And then there's a new bridge that we are currently in design for, which will connect from the city of Smyrna directly into the Battery, into Truist Park. So I'm going to focus now really on the AV segment of the sweep, or that component of it. And, the idea for the sweep came about in 2017. I think the CID sort of looked at what Atlanta was doing, saw the Beltline, and said, hey, we kind of want that sort of connectivity for our district too. Fast forward to 2020, that's when the idea for including AV and an AV shuttle came into the conversation. And then in 2022, we, after some research, decided, okay, if we're going to move forward with AV, we need to really dig in and do a study of what that potential is and what the viability is for AV in the sweep. So specifically, we wanted to look at sort of the operational concept, what that would look like. Also, we needed to look at sort of the challenges and risks that we had with deploying AV in the district, establish some of the technical specifications for deployment, what sort of vehicle capacity would we need, speed, the max grades that we could achieve. Cumberland, as you may know, has a lot of hills within it, so could we actually viably use AVs in the district, and also, what the range would be for electric AVs. And then also identifying some of the potential vendors that we could use. We looked at sort of what the state of practice was in AV across the country and really sort of came in to hone in on one particular vendor that we've been working with since that time, which is Beep out of Florida. So just a little bit more on the deployment study. We sort of assessed each segment of this sweep for constructability. We looked at alternative alignments, evaluated potential stop locations, and then one major component of that was analyzing our ridership potential. And again, we saw through that analysis that 80% of our peak hour trips touched segment C. And that's the dark blue segment there you see on the screen that connects from through Cobb Galleria Center, basically from Acres Mill over to the Battery into Truist Park. And that really informed that is the first segment that we went to design, and we're actually looking to go to construction on segment C in 2026. So that really gave us sort of the idea of where we needed to start with this. And also a key point in this is that in this study done in 22 and 23, we were working on the assumption that the AV would be accommodated in a separate facility, a separate lane, and also that it would be at less than roadway speed. So we'd only be looking at about a max speed of 15 miles per hour. Again, some of the key findings, segments C, D, and F had the highest demand. The user benefits were significantly reliant on a dependable headway of 10 to 15 minutes. That's important because we do have a current circulator system in the district. Cobb Link has the blue and green circulators. Those operate on about a 30-minute headway. So we really saw that reducing that headway was going to be of great benefit to riders. Walking distances to stops needed to be about 500 to 1,000 feet with access to the major generators in the district, again, Truist Park, the Galleria, the mall. And shuttle speeds were not as much of a factor as access and the wait times and just the visibility of the mode within the district. So we took all of the information we gathered from our deployment study and we moved into a pilot phase. Again, in partnership with BEEP, we deployed on essentially segment C of the sweep and then also connecting over the I-285 transit bridge, which connects from Cobb Galleria Center directly into Truist Park. And our goals were to learn and become sort of a regional leader in AV technology, to raise awareness of the technology and awareness of use in the district, and educate the public and our key stakeholders. We had over 11,000 riders on it, and one of the important things that we did was we did survey all of the riders. And with that, we had feedback that about 90% had a good experience, 93% felt safe, and 87% wanted to see AV and more AV throughout the Cumberland District. Here you can just see the routes that we ran with our pilot, and we ran 2 routes 5 days a week, 5 hours a day. We had 2 phases, and again, over 11,000 riders total, and we saw higher weekday ridership than weekend ridership through our pilot. So we've gone through our deployment study, we've gone into our pilot, and all of this has been happening with sort of the backdrop of the evolution of AVs in the background. We worked in our pilot with the Navia, which you can see there on the screen in the early research and demonstration phase. Again, that had about a 15 mile per hour max speed, 8 passenger max capacity. Currently, AVs are sort of preparing for scale in transit. And they're looking at sort of retrofitting existing vehicles to work in AV. VW is one of the retrofits that's being deployed. And we're moving towards this industrialization and actually purpose-built AV shuttles. So whereas the ones that we had in our pilot and the ones that you're seeing the retrofits, those you'll actually still see a steering wheel and a driver, facility within them. In the purpose-built AVs, that's gone. It's actually, just an autonomous vehicle. Also, one of the really important key things that we've learned is as we're seeing this move towards actually industrial scale of AVs, the separate facility is no longer needed because we can reach those roadway speeds. What we're looking at now is a vehicle that can reach about 37 miles per hour. Our roads within the district that we'd be running on are posted at 35. So we have dropped away the need for the separate facility, which has really sort of transformed the way we're looking at our project. Whereas before, we needed right-of-way for bike, ped, and AV. Now we just need our bike ped right-of-way, and we can move the AVs to in-lane. It also lets us sort of, separate the two components. We can move forward on both at the same time, and we can bring the AV to market much quicker. And so again, just want to touch on, I've mentioned that we have partnered with BEEP on this, and primarily we've worked with them just because of what they offer and also the depth of their experience. They've had AVs on 50 different routes in 9 to 10 different states. They've worked in a number of different capacities. They've deployed in cities, campuses, districts, national parks as well. So they've got a great depth of experience to draw from. And also they offer turnkey, mobility as a service. They can come in and actually, run the program for the CID or for our partners. And they are partnered with Holon, which is actually a subsidiary of Bentler, which is a OEM auto manufacturer with over 100 years of history. So we're, have a great partnership there to depend on. And this is the vehicle that we're looking at deploying in the district, the Holon. It's sort of the next generation platform. It's a fully accessible vehicle. It actually can kneel to provide the accessibility and has automated lock-in for wheelchairs. It's a level 4 autonomous drive system, so fully autonomous. It uses Mobileye as the ADS, and that has radar, LiDAR, and camera sensors. So you sort of have that 360 view of things, as well as supervision provided through Beep and their autonomous software, which is an AI-enabled in-cabin monitoring that feeds directly into a command center. Again, just a little bit more on Beep's autonomous system, providing that sort of service governance and passenger experience in the vehicle, and that it has that AI enabled to really parse all the data that's coming in through the Mobileye technology and to identify any service or safety impacting events. And it kind of amplifies the human in the loop decision making, in that it can help inform the command center very quickly of things that are taking place and help adjust the system in real time. And just sort of an overview of our strategy with this, as we're moving towards deployment of the AVs in the district, we're really looking to establish Cobb and Cumberland as sort of a center for autonomous mobility in the region. We're looking at transforming the way that people can move about our community in a car-free manner. We have a great asset that we have the Cumberland Transfer Center and Cobb Link in the district, and it's actually located on segment F currently of the sweep. So we have connectivity throughout all of Cobb County through Cobb Link, and also connectivity into the MARTA system directly from that. So employing the AVs gives us that first and last mile connectivity. That's so key, especially as we look at the 10 million visitors that come to the district annually and how we can move them about. Again, the integration with existing transit is key for this, and then creating and extending services, especially for our workforce. We are an entertainment and hospitality district, so we know we have a lot of hourly workers and workforce that can benefit greatly from having that first and last mile connectivity. As the other presenters have mentioned today, partnership is absolutely key in these transformative connecting projects. We would not be able to do this without our partnership with Cobb County. They've been great. The ARC has been very supportive, and GDOT has also been very supportive of our efforts on the sweep and with AV in particular. So what are our next steps? We are currently looking to deploy Holons in partnership with Cobb County, Cobb DOT, and Cobb Link on the Cumberland Circulator Blue route, sort of modified version of that. Again, using Beep to offer that turnkey service facilitated through Cobb Link. The route incorporates segments C, D, E, and F, so it actually would allow us to bring forward 4 segments of the AV component of the sweep all at once, connecting the Battery, the Galleria, Acres Mill, Cumberland Mall, the Cobb Transfer Center. And because as a CID, we aren't able to operate outside of our district, but through the partnership with Cobb Link, we can actually take this into the city of Smyrna and create the loop, which is a really huge asset for the project. And also, this will allow us to look at opportunities to expand service based on the study that Cobb County is currently undertaking about transportation alternatives or transit alternatives in the Cumberland District, which will be finished later on this year. And it also provides us the ability to fast track some of the needed transit improvements to the I-285 bridge and sweep segment D, so we can actually advance that portion of the project through the pilot that we're looking to hopefully be able to start in 2027. Thank you.
Thanks, Megan. So we have a good amount of time left for questions. I'll take a little moderator privilege and ask the first question. I did have a question for the WSP group. As far as the Stitch, I'm curious about the environmental considerations with, we're capping an interstate while we're adding these plaza and parks on top of that. What are like the challenges that you all are aware of or the mitigating factors that you're going to have to consider once you get into design? I know it's a little doozy of a question. Is the microphone on?
There you go. All right. Thank you. Yeah, I mean, of course, this project has a large portion of federal money, so we are subject to NEPA, and we have a team that's been very focused on environmental and impacts that we need to be sensitive to. It's interesting because, it is an operating interstate facility, right? And we're essentially putting a bridge on top of it. So when you define it that way, it doesn't sound nearly as complex as it really is. Right, but there are a lot of historic properties nearby that we have to pay attention to. So we've had an extensive focus on the historic resources report and working with the SHPO to get through that process. We also have issues related to noise and visual impacts. We've worked hand in hand with GDOT and with Federal Highway and other partners to really make sure that we check all of the boxes with respect to resources. I would say, defining appropriate environmental boundaries at the beginning of the project was critical. So far through that collaboration, we've been able to sort of get ahead of any potential hotspots and concerns and keep things on track. The other part that I didn't really get into the weeds on is because of the aggressive timeline for this first phase. This is right now an alternative delivery project, right, where we are working with GDOT and their program manager for this project to let to construction by September of 2026. Yes, that's true. And we are really just getting through concept design. It was a very fast schedule, so it's taken a lot of cooperation. But I think that's also allowed us to have more focus on, identifying potential impacts so that we can navigate them. But Tori, you want to add anything on the details?
The only other thing I'll mention is that Atlanta is famous for buried streetcar tracks. So we did employ a new technique, which is ground penetrating radar on a vehicle instead of the usual man like lawnmower type thing. So we did an analysis using a vehicle mounted GPR. And so the results from that are very promising. We actually collected more data than we needed. So we're just trying to figure out how to present that data with just presenting what we need, but also utilizing what we collected outside of what we need.
Thank you. Any other questions? Yes.
I have a couple questions for the Stitch. So, one, the signing and marking, did you look at about like high visibility marking, illuminated signage?
Yeah, so that's one of the things that we were looking at. I think the problem is the signs are so big, like using the traditional like illuminated street street name signs, like it's too big. They don't make them that big. So we've been looking at using type 11 sheeting instead of your typical type 9, but the tunnel itself will be lit, so we're looking at employing other fixed lighting solutions as well.
And then one more question. It looked like
No, there's no provision for widening. The MSC walls are planned to be replaced in the same location they are right now.
Other questions? Yes.
Another question for the stitch. It sounds hard.
Yes. Thanks, Audra.
No, my question is, with, you're on top of the interstate, which is a noisy, smelly place. How will that impact having the park? How do you, what's the deal?
Well, I will say we are looking at some noise canceling alternatives, including some sort of innovative barrier on the existing Peachtree Street Bridge. That's still being fleshed out now. We're looking at a lot of greenery and a lot of trees. So that is noise reduction in itself. So we're doing noise studies to see the impacts of what it's going to have being on top of the interstate. But right now we're still looking at the alternatives.
That's really cool. Thank you.
Another question for this stitch. I appreciate the intentionality with the Beltline and the thought about maintenance, long-term maintenance. What provisions on long-term maintenance, both structural and some of the built elements on top of that, have been considered as part of the stitch?
Want to take that one?
I can try, Joanna. And this is when I wish our fearless leader, Jack Seeby, were here, but he has a newborn at home, and so we're speaking on his behalf. But, I think everything from park structures to the types of vegetation that will be used we've had a mind towards long-term maintenance, right? Because there's both an expense associated with that, as well as, the labor aspect. And so it is really important to keep that in mind. I mean, we have to balance cost, right? Upfront costs with sort of the long-term asset value as well. So I don't know, I don't have like the specific materials because I'm the planner, so I'm just going to use that to take the pass. But that's been an important part of the conversation. And, we've been privileged to work with a landscape architecture firm, Hargraves Jones, who's out of New York City, who's been involved in similar projects across the country. So they've had familiarity with some of the things that have worked well in some of the similar projects that you see, like Clyde Warren Park in Dallas, and the project in Pennsylvania. So that's been helpful as well. But you want to add anything?
I'll just add that we also have to consider the weight of the materials. So, materials that last a long time are usually heavier than materials that don't. So that's been a big challenge in considering the types of materials we're using.
Yeah.
For Proctor Creek. Great project, by the way.
Yeah.
Any plans to add bike signals to the existing traffic signals?
So I think that's something we're going to evaluate. You yourself might be helping to evaluate in the signal design. But, this will be a side pass. So if you guys were in the session next door this morning, I think you guys heard a lot of trade-offs about when to use bike signals, when to not use bike signals, consideration of using the PED signal, but giving instructions for the bikes to follow the same indication. So I'm mainly thinking of the intersection of Donnelly Hollow at Marietta Street. I think that will be one of our priority intersections to make sure we're addressing the cyclists and the pedestrians, make sure they're getting across right or safely. We are also giving consideration to how we connect. I don't know if we shared as much detail, but so the western side of the project, most of it's going to be a side path on the north side, but then because we have a bridge and we don't want to replace the bridge, any work on the bridge is going to delay the project, and we want to make sure we can get this connection out as quick as possible. We're actually switching towards a cycle track on the southern side to connect to the Beltline ramp, because we also want to make sure if you're coming up from the Beltline, you can connect to these trails or have a safe facility from either ramp you use or either direction. We don't want you to be confused. We want to, make sure we're facilitating both. So I can't say for sure if there will be bike signals. There may be bike signals, but we're going to want to make sure, we provide something that's safe and also caters to the user behavior on our corridor.
And, yes.
I have a question for Megan. So the Chattahoochee recreational, is that ever going to be connected with the suite?
Yes, hopefully. Segments A and B, which have sort of were on the back burner while the new express lane ramp at Acres Mill was being completed. So we sort of let that project go forward, and we haven't moved into preliminary engineering on segments A and B. But the segment that runs down Cumberland Boulevard there and into Acres Mill, there's actually potential to create a connection into the CRNRA there. We're currently undertaking another project with the National Park Service. We're rehabilitating Paces Mill Palisades Park. So once we complete that, we can talk about another project with them.
Any other questions?
Can you put my slide back up for the
I did have another question, I guess for the Beltline group, as well as Megan with Common CID. For the transit component on the Beltline that I know you all are working through now, and you may have spoken about this before, but are you all considering like AV technologies along the Beltline, and like how are you monitoring what's going on? And the same kind of question with Megan, with AV is ever evolving, like how you all stand on top of like new developments and when's the right time to pull the trigger on new technologies and things like that.
Sure. Well, I'll start off. Can you guys hear me? Yep. Okay. Transit on the Beltline is intended to be a light rail type of system. The mayor has changed the transit plan a couple times in the last 12 months. So we're dealing with that, but the mayor has also said that it's going to be a light rail technology and it's going to come south to the south side first. Okay, so that's kind of the bigger picture. Still trying to figure out how we're going to pay for it. I alluded to the extension of the tax allocation district. That's probably mostly, if it does go through, it'll mostly be for the transit purpose. There'll still be other projects that go with affordable housing, that go with parks, that go with trails, but the vast majority of it would be the transit. We also have a pilot project with BEAT coming up here. I've got a grant agreement that I'm working through with the ATL Link to do this pilot project using Georgia Transit Trust Fund dollars and then Beltline match. We should be running a 12-month pilot project for autonomous transit over on the southwest side of town, basically linking up Atlanta University Center with the MARTA station at West End, and then the Southwest Trail at Lee plus White near Monday Night Garage and all the fun and excitement over there. And that'll start in January and run 12 months.
Nice.
We are not, the whole on vehicle that you guys are looking to do is not commercially available yet. We are going to be probably using a vehicle from a manufacturer called Carson. On the state side, they're a Turkish, basically a bus company. On the state side of things, through a company called Demera, we're going to be using, it's called the E-Jest, and it's a minibus. So it looks like a 40-foot transit bus shrunk down, and it's got capacity for 19 people in it. It still has a driver's seat and a steering wheel, but it will be an autonomous transit vehicle that has, upfitted with the technology. And then we won't be having a driver, but we will be having a customer service attendant or courtesy officer or whatever the hell we end up calling it. It won't be a driver. So although they will be at the captain's chair, so to speak, and if there is a need to intervene, they will be expected to do so. So that is what we've got going on from that perspective.
Thank you. Did you want anything, Megan?
Sure, I'll just spring off that a little bit. So one of the reasons, again, sort of with our partnership with Beep and being intentional with that is that their autonomous system or their software is vehicle and ADS, autonomous drive system agnostic. So they can, they've designed it to be able to evolve as the AV vehicles and ADS systems evolve. So that's one of the reasons we've specifically gone with them. Additionally, with what we're looking to do with the HOLON starting in 2027, that's because that's when they will be being manufactured here in the States. They're actually going to be manufactured outside of Jacksonville, Florida. So they'll be fully Buy America compliant vehicles, which is key for being able to pull down and use federal transit dollars to pay for them. Also, we're looking at, for our system, to do a lease with the vehicles for 3 years versus a purchase. Again, because we know the technology is evolving so fast, we don't want to be locked into a specific form factor.
Excellent, thank you. We've reached time, but thank you all again to the presenters, and then also to you all. And the PDH credit sheets, I believe, okay, they're right there. Thank you. They're right here on the front, on the right side. Thank you, guys.
It's okay.